Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. Asterisk asterisk. The neon lights of Neo-Tokyo flickered against the rain-soaked streets, casting a kaleidoscope of colors that reflected the bustling energy of the city. Jake Turner, a former Special Forces operative turned private contractor, navigated through the throngs of people with practiced ease. His rugged appearance and sharp gaze set him apart, hinting at a past filled with danger and discipline. Jake had been hired by a minor Earth corporation to provide security at a high-profile diplomatic gala hosted by the Andaran Empire. The event, held at the towering intergalactic embassy, was a gathering of dignitaries, politicians, and influential figures from across the galaxy. Jake had attended many such events, but this one felt different. As he approached the embassy, Jake met up with his old friend and fellow contractor, Mark Davis. Mark was a tech specialist with a knack for hacking and a penchant for getting into trouble. The two had served together in the military, and their bond had only strengthened over the years. "Jake, it's good to see you, man," Mark greeted him with a firm handshake and a grin. "Ready for another night of babysitting the rich and powerful?" Jake chuckled. "Just another day at the office, Mark. You know how it is." The two men entered the grand hall of the embassy, where alien and human attendees mingled under the opulent chandeliers. The room was filled with the hum of conversation, punctuated by the occasional clink of glasses and bursts of laughter. "Let's do a quick sweep of the perimeter," Jake suggested. "I want to make sure everything's secure before the bigwigs start their speeches." Mark nodded, and the two men split up, each taking a different section of the hall. Jake's trained eyes scanned the crowd, noting exits, potential threats, and anything out of the ordinary. As he moved through the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His instincts were proven right when a sudden commotion erupted near the stage. Jake pushed his way through the crowd, arriving just in time to see an alien assassin draw a weapon aimed at Princess Larina of Andara. Without hesitation, Jake lunged forward, tackling the assailant to the ground. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling, sending shards of crystal raining down. Mark appeared at Jake's side, his eyes wide with shock. "Jake, are you okay?" Jake nodded, his breathing heavy. "I'm fine. Secure the weapon and call for backup." As Mark dealt with the aftermath, Jake turned his attention to Princess Larina. She was a striking figure, with shimmering silver hair and eyes that glowed with an ethereal light. She looked at Jake with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You saved my life," she said, her voice melodic and calm despite the chaos around them. "Just doing my job, Your Highness," Jake replied, helping her to her feet. The princess smiled, a gesture that seemed to light up the room. "I owe you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Turner. Please, join me for a private audience after the gala. There are matters we must discuss." Jake inclined his head. "As you wish, Your Highness." Once the situation was under control, Jake and Mark regrouped in a quiet corner of the hall. Mark handed Jake a drink, his expression thoughtful. "That was some move you pulled back there," Mark said. "Do you have any idea who that assassin was?" Jake shook his head. "No, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. I've got a feeling this is just the beginning." Later that evening, after the gala had concluded and the guests had departed, Jake found himself standing outside Princess Larina's private chambers. He took a deep breath and knocked on the ornate door. "Enter," came the princess's voice from within. Jake stepped inside, finding Larina seated at a grand desk covered in holographic documents. She gestured for him to sit across from her. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Turner," she began. "I understand you are not merely a security contractor, but a man with a wealth of experience and knowledge. I have a proposition for you." Jake raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Larina leaned forward, her gaze intense. "The Andaran Empire is at a crossroads. There are factions within our society that seek to undermine the stability of our government. I believe that you, with your unique skills and perspective, could be of great assistance to us." Jake considered her words carefully. "What exactly are you asking of me, Your Highness?" "I would like you to stay in Andara as my personal protector and advisor," Larina explained. "You have already proven your loyalty and bravery. With your help, we can navigate the challenges ahead and ensure the safety of our people." Jake glanced at Mark, who had joined them and was listening intently. Mark gave him a subtle nod, indicating his support. "All right," Jake said finally. "I'll do it. But I have one condition." Larina's eyes sparkled with interest. "Name it." Mark comes with me, Jake stated firmly. He's the best tech specialist I know, and I trust him with my life. The princess smiled. Agreed. Welcome to Andara, Mr. Turner, Mr. Davis. Together, we shall forge a new path for our people. As Jake and Mark left the princess's chambers, they exchanged a look of mutual determination. They both knew that this was the beginning of a new and dangerous chapter in their lives, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Looks like we're in for quite an adventure, Jake, Mark said with a grin. Jake nodded, his expression resolute. Yeah, Mark. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. The two men walked down the corridor, their steps echoing with the promise of the unknown future that awaited them in the heart of the Andaran Empire. In the grand spires of the Andaran Palace, high above the sprawling alien cityscape, Jake Turner awoke to his first morning on a foreign planet. The sun of Andara was a brilliant shade of azure, casting a surreal glow over everything it touched. Jake's new quarters were lavishly decorated, a stark contrast to the utilitarian barracks he was used to on Earth. As he prepared for the day, his thoughts were interrupted by a chime at the door. It was Mark, looking slightly disheveled but as enthusiastic as ever. Morning, Jake. Ready to start your first official day as a royal bodyguard? Mark asked with a chuckle as he stepped inside. Still trying to wrap my head around it, to be honest, Jake replied, adjusting his new Andaran-style uniform. What's on the agenda? We've got a briefing with some of Lorena's advisors, then a tour of the palace. Oh, and she requested a meeting with us later this afternoon, Mark explained, handing Jake a tablet filled with schedules and notes. Sounds like a full day. Let's not keep them waiting, Jake said, leading the way out of his quarters. The palace was a labyrinth of corridors and halls, each more opulent than the last. As they walked, they passed various members of the royal staff, all of whom nodded respectfully at Jake and Mark. It was clear that the princess's decision to bring them on was well known throughout the palace. Their first stop was a large circular room filled with holographic displays and a long oval table. Here, they were greeted by Taryn, one of Lorena's senior advisors. Mr. Turner, Mr. Davis, welcome, Taryn said, his voice deep and resonant. We are grateful for your swift actions at the gala. The princess has high hopes for your contributions. We'll do our best, Jake replied, taking a seat at the table. The meeting was a deep dive into the current political landscape of Andara. Taryn and the other advisors outlined several factions within the empire that were less than pleased with Lorena's progressive stance and her choice to involve humans so closely in royal affairs. It's a delicate balance, Taryn explained. The princess is a visionary, but vision often brings conflict. After the briefing, Jake and Mark were given a tour of the palace, including the security control room where they met the head of palace security, an imposing Andaran named Vorik. Your backgrounds are impressive, Vorik noted, reviewing their files on a screen. I look forward to seeing how you integrate your methods with our protocols. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions and information, all leading up to their afternoon meeting with Princess Lorena. They found her in a private garden within the palace grounds, a serene oasis amid the opulence. Lorena stood gazing at a fountain, her silver hair reflecting the azure sun. She turned as they approached, smiling warmly. Jake, Mark, thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for them to join her by the fountain. I wanted to speak with you both in a more informal setting. We're honored, Your Highness, Jake responded, as they took their places next to her. Lorena's expression turned serious. I brought you here not just for protection, but because I believe you can help me change Andara for the better. My father and his court are resistant to change, but I see a different future for our people. And you think we can help with that? Mark asked, intrigued. Yes, Lorena replied confidently. Jake, your leadership and strategic mind, and Mark, your technical expertise. You both possess skills and perspectives that are rare here. I want to propose a partnership. Help me navigate the challenges ahead, and together we can build a stronger, more open Andara. Jake exchanged a look with Mark, who nodded subtly. We accept, Your Highness, Jake said after a moment. We'll do everything we can to support your vision. Lorena's eyes lit up with determination. Thank you. There's much to do, and many who will oppose us. But I believe this is the start of something truly significant. As the meeting concluded, Jake and Mark walked back to their quarters, discussing the weight of the responsibilities they had just accepted. Think we're up for this, Mark? Jake asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Mark grinned, clapping Jake on the back. With you leading the way, I'd bet on it any day, my friend. Their path was set, and the stakes were higher than ever. But together, they were ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the heart of the Andaran Empire. Inside the ornate chambers of the Royal Council Room, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation and a fair share of tension. Jake Turner, now somewhat accustomed to the grandeur of Andaran architecture, still found himself marveling at the intricate carvings that adorned the walls, depicting the storied history of the Andaran Empire. Mark Davis, on the other hand, was more fascinated by the advanced technology seamlessly integrated into the old world aesthetic. They were both there to witness and prepare for the upcoming ritual of binding, a centuries-old ceremony where the royal was to choose a consort among her protectors, a tradition held to maintain the purity of their lineage and the stability of the empire. Lorena had invited Jake and Mark to observe the initial discussions about the ritual, wanting their insights on potential security risks. As they entered the council room, they were greeted by a subtle nod from Taryn, the senior advisor, who then continued his briefing to the gathered nobles. "Esteemed members of the court," Taryn began, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "We are here to discuss the arrangements for the ritual of binding, in which our beloved Princess Lorena will select her consort from among her chosen champions. This ritual not only binds the selected consort to our princess, but also to the destiny of our empire." The nobles murmured among themselves, some looking intrigued, others clearly skeptical. The tradition had never before considered a non-Andaran candidate, and the inclusion of Jake in the pool of potential consorts was a topic of quiet contention. Princess Lorena, dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered like the starlit sky, then addressed the council. "As we stand on the brink of a new era, it is essential that we embrace change, even in our most sacred traditions. I believe that unity and strength come from diversity. This ritual will symbolize our commitment not just to our past, but to a future where Andara is a beacon for innovation and inclusivity." Jake listened intently, admiring Lorena's courage and vision. Mark leaned over to whisper, "She's really pushing the envelope here, Jake. This could really shake things up." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "Let's make sure nothing goes wrong then." The meeting progressed with the outlining of the ritual's stages. Each champion would undergo a series of trials designed to test their strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The final decision would be made at the Grand Colosseum of Andara, where the princess would publicly choose her consort. After the meeting, Lorena approached Jake and Mark. "Thank you for attending. Jake, I would appreciate it if you could be one of the champions. Your participation would not only be symbolic, but would also help demonstrate the unity I wish to achieve." Jake was taken aback by the request, but saw the determination in Lorena's eyes. "Your Highness, it would be an honor to stand as a champion in your ritual." Lorena smiled, her relief evident. "Thank you, Jake. I know this isn't what you expected when you came to Andara, but your involvement could change our empire for the better." Mark gave Jake a supportive slap on the back. "Looks like you're in for the long haul, buddy. Let's prep for these trials. Can't have you getting shown up by the Andarans." Over the next few weeks, Jake and Mark immersed themselves in preparations. Jake trained with Andaran warriors, learning their combat techniques and customs, while Mark worked on enhancing Jake's gear, integrating Andaran technology to ensure his friend had every advantage in the trials. As the day of the first trial approached, the air was thick with excitement and anxiety. The whole empire seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the outcome of a ritual that could redefine their society. Jake felt the weight of the expectations placed upon him, but was determined to see it through, not just for Lorena, but for the future of Andara. Standing at the entrance to the Grand Colosseum, Jake took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. Beside him, Mark checked the last of the gear, offering a final nod of encouragement. "Ready to make history?" Mark asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Jake grinned, tightening his grip on his newly modified staff. "Let's give them a show they won't forget." The Grand Colosseum of Andara was a monumental structure that rose above the capital's skyline like a silent guardian. Today, it was buzzing with the energy of thousands who had come to witness the trials by combat, a spectacle that had not seen a contender like Jake Turner before, a human vying for the honor of joining the Andaran royal lineage. Jake stood in the ready room, the weight of his modified armor settling on his shoulders as he went over the combat scenarios in his head. Mark, always the meticulous planner, was double-checking every piece of equipment, making adjustments where necessary. "Everything's set, Jake." Remember, these guys rely on their agility, so keep them at a distance if you can, Mark advised, handing Jake a helmet fitted with visual enhancements. Jake nodded, taking the helmet. And if they get close? Then you make them regret it, Mark replied with a grin. Outside, the crowd's roar grew louder as Princess Lorena appeared in the royal box, her presence commanding silence before she spoke. People of Andara, Lorena began, her voice amplified throughout the Colosseum. Today, we witness a tradition steeped in our history. Yet today, it is a crucible for the future we aspire to build. Let us watch with open hearts and minds. The trials commenced with the sounding of a deep, resonant horn. Jake's first opponent was a seasoned Andaran warrior named Haluk, known for his speed and lethal precision with energy blades. As they faced each other in the center of the arena, Jake could feel the intensity of the spectators' eyes on him. Haluk wasted no time, lunging forward with a speed that Jake had only seen in simulations. Dodging the first swipe, Jake countered with a strike aimed at Haluk's midsection, but the Andaran deflected it effortlessly. The battle was a dance of flashing blades and swift movements, with Jake pushing every limit of his human reflexes. As the match drew on, Jake began to adapt, reading Haluk's patterns and predicting his strikes. With a well-timed maneuver, Jake disarmed Haluk, sending the energy blades spinning away. The crowd gasped as Jake pointed his own blade at Haluk's throat, signaling the end of the match. The applause was mixed, with some cheering Jake's skill and others murmuring about the implications of his victory. As he walked back to the ready room, Jake's mind was already on the next trial, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease about how his participation was fracturing Andaran opinions. Mark was there to meet him, a wide smile on his face. That was some fight, Jake. You're adapting faster than I thought possible. Thanks, Mark, but it's not over yet, Jake replied, his eyes scanning the schedule. 2 more trials awaited him. The next challenges tested not just combat prowess, but also strategic thinking and leadership. In a simulation trial, Jake led a mixed team of human and Andaran fighters in a tactical mission. His leadership style, direct and grounded in human military tactics, was different from the Andaran's usual approach, but it proved effective, earning him grudging respect from both his team and the onlookers. The final trial of the day was a duel against a robotic adversary designed to adapt to the fighter's techniques. This was where Mark's technical ingenuity gave Jake the edge. The robot, capable of learning and evolving its strategy, initially had the upper hand, pushing Jake to the brink of exhaustion. However, using a disruptor device that Mark had integrated into his armor, Jake temporarily disabled the robot's sensory inputs, giving him just enough time to deliver a decisive blow that incapacitated the mechanical beast. As the crowd erupted into cheers and debates, Lorena watched with a complex expression, aware of the ripple effects Jake's victories were causing among her people. She knew that his success in these trials was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would be fought in the hearts and minds of her subjects. That evening, as the sun set over Andara, casting long shadows across the Colosseum, Jake and Mark discussed the day's events. "We're changing the game here, Jake," Mark said thoughtfully. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Jake looked towards the royal box where Lorena had sat. "I have to be. There's too much at stake now." As the stars began to dot the sky, Jake felt a resolve settling in his bones. Tomorrow, he would face the final trial, and his fate, and perhaps the future of Andara, would be decided. As the trials continued, Jake Turner's presence in the arena became more than a spectacle. It turned into a symbol of the shifting tides within the Andaran Empire. His unexpected success stirred not only admiration, but also a deep-seated resentment among certain factions. Nowhere was this more palpable than within the walls of King Melon's private chambers. King Melon, a ruler of considerable strength and traditional values, sat brooding over the latest reports of Jake's victories. The room was dimly lit, casting shadows that seemed to echo the king's growing concern. His trusted advisor, Vorek, stood at a respectful distance, waiting to speak. "Your Majesty," Vorek began cautiously. "Turner's successes in the trials have bolstered the princess's influence and her agenda. There are murmurs among the nobility and the military. Some see this as a weakening of our traditions." King Melon's eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked up to meet Vorek's. "And what do you suggest we do, Vorek? Sit back while this human reshapes our empire?" Vorek shifted, the weight of his armor making a soft clanking sound. "Perhaps it's time to remind everyone of the might of your rule, sire. If Turner were to falter in his next trial, it could sway public opinion back in favor of preserving our customs." Melon pondered this, his fingers tapping a rhythmic beat on the arm of his throne. Arrange it, but be discreet. We cannot appear to oppose the princess directly. Understood, Your Majesty, Vorik replied, bowing deeply before exiting the room. Meanwhile, Jake and Mark were analyzing the next set of challenges when Taryn approached them with a subtle urgency in his step. Mr. Turner, Mr. Davis, I must warn you, Taryn whispered, glancing around to ensure they were alone. There are forces at work here that wish to see you fail. The king is not pleased with the influence you're wielding through the princess. Jake's jaw tightened. Thanks for the heads up, Taryn. We'll be careful. Mark looked between them, his face serious. We need to up our game, Jake. Whatever they're planning, we better be ready for it. The following day, Jake entered the arena for what would be one of his most challenging trials yet. The task was a battle simulation involving complex environmental hazards and a series of puzzles that required both physical prowess and intellectual acuity. As the trial commenced, Jake quickly realized that the difficulty level had been significantly increased. The hazards were more lethal, and the puzzles required knowledge of Andaran history and culture that he had not yet mastered. Unbeknownst to him, Vorik had enlisted the help of one of the Empire's most cunning tacticians to design this particular trial, ensuring it would test Jake to his limits. Despite the odds, Jake's determination did not waver. With Mark feeding him crucial pieces of information through a discreet earpiece and relying on his own rapidly adapting skills, Jake navigated the treacherous terrain. However, halfway through, a trap that had not been in the initial briefing was triggered, releasing a swarm of drone attackers. Jake fought valiantly, but it was clear that this was a scenario designed to be nearly impossible to overcome. From the stands, Princess Lorena watched with growing anxiety. She could see the unevenness of the trial, her suspicions about her father's interference growing. Yet her faith in Jake spurred hope that he might yet prevail. With a mixture of skill and sheer will, Jake managed to disable the last of the drones, though not without sustaining a few minor injuries. Breathing heavily, he completed the final puzzle just as the timer wound down, barely securing a pass. The crowd, having witnessed the evident disparity in the trial's fairness, erupted into a mix of cheers and outraged shouts. Lorena stood up, her applause ringing out clear and strong, a signal of her unwavering support for Jake. After the trial, back in the relative safety of their quarters, Jake and Mark reviewed the day's events. They're definitely trying to push you out, Mark said, his voice low. That was too close, Jake. Jake nodded, his mind racing. We need to stay one step ahead of them. This isn't just about the trials anymore. It's about surviving. As they prepared for the next day, the stakes were higher than ever, and Jake knew he wasn't just fighting for his place in the trials, but for a future that could either bridge two worlds or see them forever divided. The aftermath of the controversial trial left the Andaran capital buzzing with tension and speculation. Despite Jake's narrow success, the obvious manipulation of the event had sown seeds of dissent among the populace and the nobility alike. The palace, usually a beacon of order and tradition, now thrummed with whispered conversations and covert meetings. In a secluded garden within the palace grounds, Princess Lorena convened a secret meeting with Jake, Mark, and a small group of her most trusted advisors, including Taryn. The azure sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the assembled group. Thank you all for coming, Lorena began, her voice steady despite the clear strain of recent events. We are at a critical juncture. It's clear that my father and his loyalists will stop at nothing to prevent any change that threatens their hold on power. Jake, his injuries from the trial bandaged but still visible, nodded. We knew this wouldn't be easy, Your Highness. The trial was rigged, but we managed to get through it. We can expect more of the same, or worse. Taryn, his expression grave, added, The king is preparing to escalate his efforts. He's been meeting with commanders of the Imperial Guard and influential nobles, rallying support to enforce traditional values. Mark, leaning against a stone bench, interjected, We need to be proactive. We've been playing defense too long. It's time to take the initiative and show the people of Andara that your vision, Princess, is the way forward. Lorena looked around the circle, her resolve hardening. I agree, Mark. We must demonstrate the strength of our ideals. Tomorrow's trial will be public, and we should use it as a platform to unite those who believe in our cause. The discussion shifted to planning for the next day. Jake would face a duel trial, one that tested both combat skills and the ability to lead under pressure. The trial, set in the ancient Arena of Unity, would not only be a test for Jake, but also a statement to all of Andara about the strength and validity of Larena's progressive alliance with humanity. As night fell, Jake and Mark returned to their quarters to prepare. Mark adjusted Jake's armor, integrating a few new defensive mechanisms. "They won't catch us off guard again," he assured Jake. Meanwhile, King Malin, aware of the growing support for Lorena, convened his own council. In the shadows of the throne room, the king and his loyalists plotted to undermine the next trial, not realizing that their actions were only tightening the unity among Lorena's supporters. The day of the trial arrived with a tense anticipation hanging over the capital. Citizens and nobles alike filled the arena of unity, their murmurs reflecting the divided sentiments of the empire. Jake stood at the center of the arena, surrounded by a mix of human and Andaran warriors, all chosen to follow his lead in a simulated battle scenario. As the signal horn sounded, Jake took command with a confidence born of countless battles on Earth and his trials on Andara. The scenario was intense, featuring environmental hazards and enemy combatants that required both strategic thinking and physical prowess to overcome. However, Jake's leadership shone through, his directives clear and his tactics innovative, adapting on the fly to the shifting conditions of the battle. From her seat above the arena, Lorena watched with pride as Jake skillfully maneuvered his team to victory. The crowd, seeing the effectiveness of a leader who valued cooperation and innovation over tradition and force, responded with roaring approval. After the trial, as the arena cleared, Jake met Lorena at the edge of the field. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of relief and joy. "You did more than win a trial today, Jake. You've shown all of Andara what we can become together." Jake, catching his breath, smiled. "We're not across the finish line yet, Your Highness, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they left the arena side by side, the cheers of the crowd echoed in their ears, a sound that carried both hope and the promise of impending confrontation. The battle for Andara's future was far from over, but for now, Jake and Lorena had won a crucial victory, both in the arena and in the hearts of many Andarans. The momentum from Jake's victory in the arena of unity rippled across Andara, swaying public opinion and unsettling the old guard further. King Malin, feeling the foundations of his rule beginning to tremble, knew drastic measures were required. He sanctioned a final, clandestine move against Jake, a move designed not only to eliminate him as a contender, but to crush the burgeoning spirit of reform. The morning of the final trial arrived, a day marked by a tense, electric atmosphere that enveloped the capital. Jake and Mark prepared in the dim light of dawn, their quarters a hive of quiet activity. Mark handed Jake a newly modified piece of armor, its surface sleek and barely reflecting the low light. "This should help deflect any surprises they might have lined up for you," Mark said, his tone a mix of jest and solemnity. Jake adjusted the armor, testing its weight and fit. "Thanks, Mark. Whatever happens today, it's been one hell of a ride." Mark clapped him on the shoulder. "Not over yet, my friend. Let's see this through to the end." The Grand Colosseum, a vast arena steeped in history and blood, was the stage for the final duel. The event was broadcast throughout the empire, screens flickering to life in homes and public squares, capturing the collective breath of a nation on the brink of change. As Jake entered the Colosseum, the crowd erupted into a cacophony of cheers and boos, the air thick with anticipation and anxiety. High above, in the royal box, Lorena watched with a stony face, aware of her father's machinations and fearful for what might unfold. Jake's opponent was revealed to be none other than the king's champion, Doran, a formidable warrior enhanced by the latest in Andaran military technology. Doran's reputation as an unbeatable combatant preceded him, his figure imposing as he stepped into the arena, armed with a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. The duel commenced with the crash of the gong, its sound reverberating off the stone walls. Doran wasted no time, advancing with a speed and precision that were almost non-human. Jake dodged and parried, his own skills honed over the previous trials pushing him to meet each of Doran's attacks. As the duel intensified, Jake realized that winning through physical prowess alone would be impossible. He needed to outthink his opponent. Recalling the information Mark had fed him about Doran's enhancements, Jake began to target the less protected joints in Doran's armor, exploiting small gaps and weaknesses. Doran, realizing that Jake was not the straightforward fighter he had anticipated, adjusted his strategy, his attacks becoming more varied and unpredictable. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, watching as each combatant adapted and countered, their movements a blur of speed and force. The turning point came when Jake feinted a direct attack, leading Doran to overcommit to a defensive maneuver. Using the brief opening, Jake deployed a non-lethal stun device that Mark had integrated into his armor. The device emitted a powerful surge of energy, momentarily overloading Doran's enhancements. With Doran stunned and disoriented, Jake disarmed him, pressing the tip of his blade against his opponent's chest armor. The arena fell silent, the outcome hanging in the balance. Jake looked up towards Lorena, seeking her guidance. With a subtle nod, she signaled him to stay his hand. Turning back to Doran, Jake offered him help up, a gesture of respect and mercy that resonated deeply with the watching crowd. The king, witnessing this display of honor and the crowd's reaction, realized his efforts to sway public opinion had backfired. The cheers for Jake's victory and the respect he showed his opponent echoed through the Colosseum, signifying not just a win in the arena, but a victory for Lorena's vision for Andara. As the royal guards escorted a defeated but alive Doran away, Jake and Lorena met in the center of the arena. Her eyes were bright with tears of relief and pride as she approached him, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the crowd. Today, we witnessed not just a duel of warriors, but a clash of ideals. Andara must be a realm where strength is measured not just by power, but by honor and vision. Together, we will build that future. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound a powerful testament to the changing tide. Jake, standing beside Lorena, knew that the real work was just beginning. But for now, they had won a crucial battle, one that would lead Andara into a new era. The day of the coronation ceremony dawned bright and clear, with the azure sun of Andara casting a radiant light over the capital. The city was abuzz with preparations, the air filled with a sense of renewal and anticipation. Today was not just a coronation, it was a celebration of a new era for the Andaran Empire, led by Princess Lorena and Jake Turner, the man who had come from another world to stand by her side. In the royal chambers, Lorena prepared for the ceremony with a quiet dignity. Her robes were of the finest Andaran silk, embroidered with symbols of unity and progress, reflecting the ideals she hoped to embody as a ruler. As she adjusted her crown, a delicate circlet set with the light-reflecting stones of Andara, she felt the weight of her responsibilities settle upon her shoulders. Meanwhile, Jake was in his own quarters, donning the ceremonial attire that Mark had helped prepare. The outfit blended elements of his Earth heritage with Andaran designs, symbolizing the fusion of their cultures. As he looked in the mirror, he realized how much he had changed since his arrival on Andara. He was no longer just a soldier. He had become a leader in his own right. Mark entered, holding the ceremonial sword that Jake would carry into the ceremony. "Ready to make this official?" he asked with a grin. Jake took the sword, feeling its balance. "As I'll ever be," he replied, the reality of the moment settling in. The ceremony took place in the grand hall of the palace, a vast room with ceilings that soared to the sky, adorned with the banners of the Andaran Empire. Nobles, dignitaries, and citizens from across the empire filled the room, their voices hushed in anticipation. As the royal procession began, Jake walked beside Lorena, their steps in sync. The crowd rose, their applause echoing off the marble walls as the couple approached the dais. King Melon, who had seen the inevitability of this day, stood to officiate the ceremony. His face was stoic, but there was a glimmer of acceptance in his eyes. He had come to understand that his daughter's choices were shaping a stronger future for Andara. "Citizens of Andara," Melon began, his voice resonating through the hall, "we gather here to witness the union of two leaders, two visions, two worlds. This coronation not only reaffirms our traditions, but redefines them in the light of a new dawn." Lorena then stepped forward, addressing the assembly. "Today, I vow to serve Andara with all my heart, to cherish the wisdom of our past while embracing the possibilities of our future. I stand before you with Jake, a man who has shown us that courage and honor know no bounds, no planetary origin." Turning to Jake, Lorena took his hands in hers. "Together, we will lead Andara towards a horizon bright with promise." Jake, moved by the significance of the moment, responded, "I came to Andara as a protector, but I stand here now as a partner, in leadership and life. I vow to uphold the ideals of this empire and to stand beside Lorena as we forge a path forward for all Andarans, united." King Melon then placed the crown upon Lorena's head, symbolizing her official ascension to the throne. He then turned to Jake, presenting him with a medallion of office, signifying his role as consort and protector of the realm. The ceremony concluded with the royal couple turning to face their people, their hands joined. The applause that rang out was not just for their union, but for the dawn of an era that promised greater inclusivity and collaboration. As the celebrations began, Jake and Lorena stepped out onto the palace balcony, overlooking the cityscape of Andara. The setting sun cast a golden glow, and as they looked out over the capital, their hearts were full of hope and determination. "We have much to do," Lorena whispered, squeezing Jake's hand. "But we'll do it together," Jake replied, his voice firm with resolve. Below them, the cheers of the people of Andara rose up, a wave of sound that carried with it the promise of a brighter future, a testament to the power of unity and the enduring strength of a shared vision.